Our guest today became president of the MacArthur Foundation nearly 10 years ago. Prior to that, he had been president of the New School for Social Research in New York City for 17 years. MacArthur is one of the nation's largest foundations. It makes grants and program-related investments totaling more than $300 million annually. At Yale University, our guest today earned a baccalaureate degree in 1965, a master's in philosophy in 1977, and a doctorate in American history in 1978. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the City Club of Chicago, the president of the MacArthur Foundation, Johnathan Fanton. Johnathan?
Well, thank you, Jay, for that generous introduction, especially coming after Paul's comment about being hard to fill the room. But, you know, with Paul going around, and I heard him do this, you know, did you know that Joe Biden didn't think you should be here? In any case, I'm very glad to be back at the City Club. I always enjoy this event, perhaps more than any other that I do all year. And I enjoy the Q&A give and take. I look forward to that. In years past, I've spoken about MacArthur's work in its hometown and also about our global programs, particularly the UN. Today, I've chosen the topic that ties together our domestic and international work, the global mobility of people. And notice I didn't use the word immigration, which I think is limited and often conjures up negative images: illegal border crossings, competition for domestic jobs, challenges to local culture, and all the rest. But that's an old way of thinking. New thinking, which MacArthur's supporting, takes a global perspective and sees the movement of people as a natural and mostly positive phenomenon, but one that is so far not well understood. Chicago is surely a global city, and I think our bid for the Olympics has just reinforced that sensibility. It is also a case study, I think, for the new way of thinking about human mobility as an engine of development and economic vitality. And I'm going to talk about that more in a moment, but first the sort of headline news version of what's going on at MacArthur. Well, we all feel the economic decline. MacArthur's no exception. Our endowment lost about 25% last year after 5 years of exceptional gains. From a high of almost $7 billion, we're down a little under $5 billion, and that's because we've continued to spend. But we did exceptionally well in the good years, and that allowed us to put some money aside. And so I'm happy to say that for the year we're in and for next year, our grant making will be essentially stable. And I hope that will allow us to help our grantees ride out the worst of the economic turmoil. And in Chicago, even though we may be level elsewhere, we've been increasing our giving. Our arts and culture grantees, 200 of them on average, got a 20% hike in general operating support this year. We have set up a bridge fund at Shorebank to give short-term cash flow loans for organizations that are having trouble making ends meet, especially the smaller ones. And in the affordable housing preservation area, which is one of our main interests, we are working to try to prevent foreclosures wherever we can, especially in the 16 neighborhoods where we're working in partnership with LISC. We originally launched a $70 million foreclosure prevention and mitigation initiative aimed at those neighborhoods from Humboldt Park to West Haven, from Bronzeville to South Chicago, all part of our New Communities program. The aim of the initiative over the next couple of years is to reach out and counsel several thousand families, and if we're lucky, to avert foreclosure for 2,000 to 3,000 of them. And we're very proud to be working with the Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago on the counseling side, and with Shorebank and self-help ventures on new loan products. And you know, on some blocks where we've been working, there are already a lot of foreclosures, boarded up homes that depress property values, invite crime, blight the improvement that we were seeing in those neighborhoods. And so we're supporting the city of Chicago's back-end efforts to purchase these properties, and with its partner Mercy Housing to get them back into productive use through sale, rental, or an innovative lease-to-purchase program. And we'll do more, but at a time when everybody is hurting, that is a time for foundations to step up, be counted, be steady, to be a place you can turn to and trust, and that is our ambition. Beyond Chicago, we're determined not to let the economic downturn cripple our major new initiatives. We're moving ahead with a new Asia Security Initiative, a new program to strengthen regional commissions and courts, human rights courts in Africa, an expansion of our juvenile justice work in the U.S. to include indigent defense, a new focus in our conservation program on adaptation to climate change, a stepped-up investment in helping India and Nigeria meet the Millennium Development Goal number 5, which is to reduce maternal mortality. All those initiatives are going forward as planned. And this is the final headline. We've created an expert committee at the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Public Administration to study the fiscal challenges that our country faces. And this we'd done 2-3 years ago, even before the recession. If current budget policies are continued, America's public debt will reach 60% of GDP by 2010. Spending on Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security will more than double by 2050 from 9% of GDP at present to nearly 20% then. And if you add entitlements to interest on the federal debt, and by 2030, all federal revenues are spoken for, with nothing left for education, the environment, research and development, or infrastructure. That is a powerful number, and all those numbers preceded the new borrowing that comes in the stimulus package that can only make those numbers closer at hand. And just think of the unimaginable, something that we are simulating. Supposing friendly countries like China decided they didn't want to buy up our debt. That would really be a catastrophic problem for us, and we're working with the Tax Policy Center on scenarios for what would we do if our debt became less attractive. The nonpartisan expert committee this fall will lay out the problem and offer 4 scenarios for addressing it. The scenarios will be based on widely held values and preferences of the American public. Some will favor defense, others domestic equity, and so forth. But all will involve painful choices and wise use of public monies. And so this is a moment in which we really do have to pay attention to the long-term fiscal health of this country, which is in jeopardy. Coming back to MacArthur, we, like all foundations, and I was just in a meeting with all the big ones, Gates, Rockefeller, Ford, and so forth last week, no question, everybody's going to have to sharply cut back. The only difference is we're plotting a glide path, not a crash landing. Most foundations are going to cut more sharply starting in 2010. We're not. We're going to do it over a 5-year period, and through it all, we're going to protect our core commitments. Surely our commitment to Chicago is safe. Our core fields like conservation and human rights and housing are safe, and the grantees that are central to those fields we will continue to support. But there'll be not so much money in the near run left for new ideas or those nice-to-do things as we pull back and concentrate on our core mission. Anyway, I'm happy to talk more about that and retrospective on MacArthur during the Q&A period. Let me get along to my main topic. Migration is one of the constants of human experience. From Africa, the world's first people spread across the globe, seeking new resources and opportunities. The founding stories of many cultures tell us of a journey to new lands, and much of recorded history deals with the movement of people, travel, exploration, invasion, colonization, and all the rest. Americans have an intuitive grasp of immigration's importance. We are often called a nation of immigrants, and Chicago is one of the great immigrant cities of the world, built by those who moved here in the 19th century from Europe and the East Coast, by African Americans from the South, and by Mexicans from all over that great country. We tend to see human mobility through the lens of seeking opportunity in a new nation, assimilating, becoming citizens. But that's only one narrative. This is an interesting statistic. Globally, 200 million people are living outside their countries of birth. Some have temporary jobs on construction sites, high-tech startups, nursing homes, mines, whatever. Others are studying abroad or learning about a new culture, and still others are joining family. And a growing number of retirees from other countries are just seeking nicer places to live. But not all have moved for good. Some plan to go home eventually, more financially secure or better qualified. Others will move constantly from nation to nation as they are transferred by multinationals or start work on the next big project. Others will go back and forth between their country of origin and their new home. And that's the essential message, that migration and mobility now needs to be thought of as circular and not one-way, linear. Modern transportation has made mobility cheaper and easier, and new communication technology keeps people connected to more than one nation, active in social, professional, and political networks. And such people are naturally multicultural and transnational, and they may choose to retain connections to their home countries even over several generations. So all these kinds of migrants constitute a powerful trend in the interconnection of our world, and yet migration of all aspects of globalization is the least well understood and the most poorly governed. And this is a glaring anomaly. We have good statistics on international trade, but not for the movement of people. We know that the world's currency and investment markets are tightly linked, but we're only beginning to understand the complex dynamics of the global labor force. And the world has protocols and institutions for trade, finance, the environment, weapons control, but nothing to govern the movement of people. So this new reality creates difficulties for nations and for international bodies. Governments are uncomfortable with people who cannot be neatly categorized as citizens or aliens. Laws regulating the labor market, benefits, health service, or military obligations are inflexible. Countries that attract migrants worry about security, social conflict, and the costs that come with a diverse population. Countries whose nationals migrate fret about losing talented people or seeing them exploited abroad. And international bodies do not have the authority or the capability to regulate the flow of people or settle conflicts between states. And without reliable data, they cannot even assess the situation and the policy options accurately. Now, MacArthur's initiative on mobility and migration is global. It is not a U.S. immigration reform policy. It is not focused only on Mexico, U.S. questions. It is really looking at this in global perspective. We begin with a set of principles. First, migration must be a matter of choice. People should not be forced to relocate or prevented. Second, migrants must be treated with dignity and their human rights respected. Third, migration can and should be integral to national, regional, global strategies for economic growth in both developing and the developed world. And finally, the governance of international migration can and should be improved. It's in the self-interest of all nation states to create better policies. We believe that migration can benefit the countries people come from, those they go to, and the migrants themselves, the so-called triple win. This does not have to be a zero-sum game. It does not have to be a game with winners and losers. It can be a process, if intelligently executed, where all come out ahead. So how do we get there? First, we need a better understanding of migration, more reliable data, and a study of how migration and development are linked. And that's the cutting edge of this research, the link between migration and development. Second, we must take practical, if incremental, steps toward better governance. So let me start with information. There are plenty of open questions about the fundamental facts of migration. Some appear simple, but are not easy to answer. How many migrants really are there? What do their journeys look like? How are patterns changing? We're funding projects such as a Commission on International Migration Data for Development. Its goal is to encourage better statistics on migration and better use of available data. We're underwriting a study of migration to and from Ghana, Morocco, and the Democratic Republic of China, and Nigeria by the International Migration Institute at Oxford. And we fund the Latin America Migration Project at Princeton, which documents migration patterns and impacts across 10 countries of South and Central America. So better data will help both research and policymakers. Other issues are daunting in their complexity. How does migration contribute to economic growth, to international financial flows? What effects does it have on individuals and their families? How are cultures, religions, ethnic identities, or patterns of public health changing as populations move? How does migration affect national politics and geopolitical dynamics? Leading scholars are taking up all these questions with MacArthur support. Giovanni Perry, an economist we fund at UCal Davis, quantifies how immigrants boost the economies of countries they move to, contrary to a popular myth. He shows that immigrants lower the labor costs, create incentives for native workers to specialize and upgrade their skills, and allow them to move into better paid jobs that require strong language competency. And overall, Perry shows that immigrants drive innovation and productivity, increasing the variety of goods and services a country produces. But we know the other side, the brain drain. When skilled people leave, their home nations lose out. But it's also true that one of the most effective ways for a family in a developing country to raise its standard of living is to have one of its members move to a developed country and send money back in what we call remittances. In 2008, and this figure always staggers me, in 2008, about $300 billion in remittances were sent, and that's more than twice all the official foreign aid to developing countries. Think of it. More than twice, not just USAID, but all foreign assistance is only half of what remittances produce. And unlike the top-heavy, sometimes misguided spending by agencies like the IMF and the World Bank, individual remittances go directly to those they're intended to help, paying for school fees, medical bills, small business startup, housing, community development, and all the rest. And this is interesting. Even in this economic downturn, remittance rates have held up remarkably well and sometimes completely offset by currency changes. The World Bank's Dilip Rota found that remittances around the world went up 8% last year, while foreign direct investment into Mexico dropped 30% last year, remittances were only down by 4%. So migrants send money home in good times and bad. Remittances should be easy to send, not laden with high fees. They ought to be easy to redeem. And those who send the money like to know that it's being put to good use. And so we have a MacArthur study at the University of Michigan working with Bank Agricola in El Salvador to test new financial products that give migrants greater control over how their remittances are used. Migrants also help their countries by spreading information about investment opportunities, building international networks, sharing technology. The growth of the IT industry in India is a very good example. MacArthur's financing research at Harvard that's examining how migrants are helping their countries of origin. Because migrants can push positive change through what they learn by sharing it with their home countries, and that lead to improvement in healthcare, education, human rights, the use of technology, and all the rest. But with all these positives, we know that migration also has negative effects on developing countries. It separates families, leaving children to be raised by grandparents. It drains the most vital members away from struggling rural communities. And it may take the pressure off governments that fail to provide security or encourage economic growth. So I now move then to my second point, and that's the governance of migration. This is perhaps the key issue. Complex, highly sensitive, transnational migration policy change is going to be tough. Yet millions of people suffer for lack of systems that are rational, transparent, or fair. MacArthur's governance work is aimed at three levels: global arrangements, regional partnerships, and bilateral agreements. At the global level, MacArthur is the leading non-governmental supporter of the Global Forum on Migration and Development. The forum emerged from a UN high-level dialogue held in September 2006 that raised but did not resolve important issues. And that dialogue now is transmorphed into this forum that meets annually. 150 governments are now part of this conversation. The forum is not a formal government process. Participating countries don't commit themselves to binding agreements, and that's the beauty of it. But they do share what's proved to be helpful, find ways to cooperate voluntarily, discover areas of mutual interest in politically neutral and safe space. And common norms and standards are beginning to develop. Well, what are some of the issues? There need to be better ways for migrants to go back and forth, what's called temporary or circular migration. Migrants ought to have more freedom in choosing which country will be their primary residence. They should be able to move their pensions and benefits, and they should not face onerous double taxation. Now, we don't expect to see a world body that will govern migration anytime soon, but nations can work together to ensure that migrants are treated more fairly and migration becomes a safer, more positive experience. Another key topic for this forum is how migrant labor is recruited. The healthcare sector is an obvious area of concern. I know the Consul General of the Philippines is here, so this is, I know, of particular interest to her in that country. MacArthur is a lead sponsor of a code of ethics for recruiting nurses to the We look toward a governance regime that will codify the rights of migrants, foster cooperation between countries of origin and destination, and maximize the development results of migration across the board. And there is perhaps no striking picture of the impact of global mobility than that of President Obama and his extended family in all of its ethnic and geographic diversity. This ought to remind us that migration is ultimately not about statistics, trends, or legislation. It's the sum of the trials, hopes, and dreams of millions of people moving to escape poverty or injustice, to find stability and prosperity for those they love, and devote more fully and develop more fully their potential as human beings. Their journeys must continue to fire our imagination and to stir our sense of responsibility. So as my time as President MacArthur comes to an end in early July, I expect to become a circular migrant, keeping Chicago very much at the center of my circulation. It's been a great run, They say time flies when you're having fun. I did, and it did. I've learned a lot, and I come away inspired by the courageous and talented people that MacArthur's able to support all over the world, including right here in Chicago. Our new president, Robert Galucci, shares the values and beliefs that animate our work in Chicago, across the nation, and around the world. I like him. You will too. He's eager to learn about Chicago and will maintain MacArthur's commitment, strong and sound, to its hometown. As I say, I'll be on sabbatical for the next half of the year, but I expect to return to the arena after that, fully refreshed and ready for a new challenge in the new year. So in the meantime, I want to keep in touch with all of you and the issues that we have in common and the passions we share. I thank you for your attention today and always, and I look forward to your questions, not just about migration, but let's talk about MacArthur and Chicago or anything else on your minds. Thank you very much for this.
Teresa, raise your hand if you have questions, and the Ghost of Christmas Past will be around to pick it up. There's Teresa. Just raise your hand. And before we ask the question, John, I think give you a chance to sound like Phil Jackson there. You had a great run and all that kind of stuff. Very good. We have a couple of people we miss. Suzanne Malik McKenna, Commissioner of the Department of Environment. Where are you, Suzanne? And of course, error on the Professor Green. Seldom does he ever admit any errors. But we have with us somebody who's pretty important in education, and a former state official, Mike Bacalus. Michael, stand up. Only old guys like Hardigan, have to look around and see that. All right, and guess who has the first question? Suzanne Malik McKenna. Coincidence. This past week, we saw an incredible overblown drama with swine flu. Do you agree? If you say yes, I continue. How can a global organization such as the MacArthur Foundation have an impact on global communications such that nations, so that you know the rest, just read it. Go ahead. The question's a little shorter.
Well, first of all, MacArthur is a global institution, and we think globally. We have a network of grantees in 60 countries around the world where we work, and also sets of relations with governments in those countries. So we are able to, and see part of our role is enhancing global communication and building up understanding and respect among nations and their peoples. And so when a crisis occurs, the MacArthur network of literally hundreds of non-governmental organizations all over the world can be harnessed to get good information out, to spark sensible conversations based on evidence, to try to quell anxiety and take the time to think it through and get it right and not overreact.
This one's from Brian Bernardoni, the proud papa, from the Chicago Area Realtors. How does MacArthur's commitment to Chicago change depending upon the success of the 2016 Olympic bid, especially related to its progressive housing and economic development efforts?
MacArthur has started a fund at the Community Trust that a number of foundations have contributed to, and the goal of that special fund is to help neighborhoods get ready for the Olympics and to be present at the table when infrastructure and other important decisions are being made. Also, to be ready if the Olympics do come, to take advantage of tourism and jobs and all the rest. So we've seen our special role here is helping the neighborhoods that will be affected by the Olympics make the Olympics a big plus for them. I'm hoping the Olympics do come, and I think if they do, they will be a benefit for all the residents of our city.
Here's a question I know that's going to be a good one. How has the economic downturn impacted migration advocate efforts like yours to achieve some of your reform?
I don't think there's any question that the downturn will slow up, cause a pause in the most progressive thinking on immigration and migration reform. But it's only a pause. I think the direction, everything I was talking about, will resume after the downturn. But there's certainly plenty of signs of countries closing borders to migrants and all the rest in the short term. But there are some interesting statistics. Europe, of course, is losing population, and just to sort of stay even, they have to have something like a 10% increase in current levels of migration if they're going to keep their workforce vital. So there are other trends that are going on and that are not short-term trends at all that will raise the stakes on getting migration reform.
To those who ask questions, remember the media. You could come up and see Mr. Fanton afterwards, but we don't give media questions during the question and answer time. Sort of a rule that I imposed a few weeks ago. Some of you might remember there was a little controversy. Anyways, how about a big round of applause for Mr. Fanton?